It's in. Someone even brought their dog. It's important. That dog might have voted. You're right. It's important. It's important for people to know that what happened in Vegas, the entire world needs to understand. In this point, in this election cycle, it is critical that the vast majority of Americans have confidence in the result of this election. We have seen political division like we haven't seen in a number of years. The way we resolve division, even when you don't get your way in an election, is to count every legal ballot and to make sure that we count every legal ballot and make sure that illegal ballots do not reduce the civil rights and the votes of those who voted legally. Since we've put this group together to scrutinize the information that we've been able to learn while being cut out of the observation process and the tallying that's going on in Clark County, we now have thousands of examples of voter irregularity. That takes several forms. I've been involved in politics a long time. I was shocked to learn from our hotline, from the conversations we've been having, from things sent to the website, that hundreds of Republicans were disenfranchised, were denied the right to vote, both on Election Day and leading up in the early vote. They were put through a process that proved impossible to satisfy in order to cast their legal vote. We will be finding and investigating and going through all of these examples, of which I said there are hundreds. Dead people voted in Clark County.
No respect.
That is a tricky thing because obviously for these families, this is a very tragic reminder of a loss that they have just recently had to go through. We have two examples that we have talked about and want to talk about today. One is the death of Rosemary Hartle in 2017. The other is the death of Fred Stokes Jr. in 2017. Miraculously, they both voted, which means that the voter file that was used to send out these mail-in ballots was not deduped by death records. We know that underage voters voted in this most recent election. How difficult would it have been to make it clear that nobody would have been mailed a ballot if they had a birth date after a certain year? We know that in this area, which has been gripped with the idea of an economic shutdown, that over 100,000 people left. Yet, through our due diligence, we've been able to find that at least 9,000 of them voted in this election. Non-Nevadans voting in Nevada. How hard would it have been to simply go through the available databases to dedupe all those who had moved away from the voter files before these ballots were mailed?
Or they don't do that, I still got my...
We have, over the last couple days, had many brave people call us who have witnessed tampering, who have witnessed wrongdoing. These are brave whistleblowers.
Workers. Heroes.
These folks worked in the counting center, were involved in the tallying, and Fox News recently reported that one of these whistleblowers had to quit, and I'm going to just use the male pronoun, had to quit his job after he worked on about 14,000 ballots, when he would raise objections to clearly improper ballots, he was told by his supervisor to put them through the process and count them anyway.
No integrity.
This whistleblower believes that there were other such employees who were also uncomfortable with the fact that when they could see clearly objectionable ballots, they were still forced to put them in the tally. These ballots can never be taken back out of that tally. These ballots, there's no way to remedy ballots that were put in an improper way. A second whistleblower we have not talked about before described leaving on, and I'm going to use the male pronoun again, leaving on his lunch hour. And while he was on his lunch hour, he decided to exercise around the counting center. While he was walking, he noticed a van pulled up at the center marked Biden-Harris. The doors of the van were open, ballots were clearly visible, ballots were opened with letter openers, and ballots were filled in and resealed in envelopes.
No integrity.
These people who were involved in this activity then decided to create a human shield around what they were doing in the van.
Treason.
It's important for you to understand that as we are coming and making public, it's important for you to understand that as we are making this information public, we are on the outside looking in. I've never experienced an election where the idea of observing the count was considered out of bounds. But yet I think it is clear that with the evidence we're presenting, that if we had more information and this was a more regularized and legal process, we would be able to tell you even more. As I said, dead people voted in Nevada. One of those people who voted was Rosemary Hartle, God rest her soul. We have a friend of the family, Marianne Rambola, who would like to talk to us now.
Sorry. No integrity.
Hi, Kirk Hartle, her husband, could not make it today as he's in transit, though I am here to say that it is heartbreaking what is happening in America, and for this family to be exploited, or anybody who has faced a tragedy in losing somebody and their vote has been counted as a deceased person. This is just not America, and this is not right, and things need to be heard and taken care of, because it's just heartbreaking for my friend Kirk and his family to have received this information that her vote has been counted. Thank you.
So sorry.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
In the following video, you are going to see a CNN update of the Pennsylvania elections in live time. What you're going to notice is that Pennsylvania, which you can see here, Trump and Biden, Trump was leading. He had 1,690,589 votes. Biden had 1,252,537 votes. Trump was well in the lead. I'm going to let this video finish, and then at the end, I'm going to pause it. And I want you to remember this number: 1,690 for Trump, 1,252 for Biden, and then we're going to do some math.
And that would push, and again, if you come at this from a Republican perspective, I did Joe Biden's math to get him up. Donald Trump's leading here. He's leading here. He's leading here. We expect him to win here. That's his. This one's interesting. We expect him to get this. And these normally would be Trump states out here. And Alaska. So, again, we're open to being surprised. But if it plays out in a traditional map, that's where we're going to be. That's where we'll be as we go to the West Coast, somewhere in that ballpark. This is not an exact science. but somewhere in that ballpark.
So here we go. We've had 30 seconds of updates. Pennsylvania is in. But look, Trump has lost 19,950 votes. Now here's the thing. Did a little work here, and I want you to see this in Photoshop. At the beginning of the clip, Trump has 1,690,000. The update comes, Trump is up 440,000 votes. Trump loses 19,958, but guess what? Biden gains those votes. Take a look at Biden. 1,252,000 votes to 1,272,000 votes. If this doesn't raise a red flag for the judiciaries of Pennsylvania, we know this happened in Nevada. There's other videos. Who's to say this hasn't happened all over the world? You know, scorecard doesn't have to take over every county in a state. It just has to help Biden lose by 3% less in the state so they can backpack the ballots at the end. Trump has won this election. This has to be called into question. We want Congress and the FBI to mount a full investigation, and we will riot in the streets if they don't. We cannot allow the Democrats to tear down this nation again. Listen to me. If they win this election corruptly like this, using hammer and scorecard, they will never lose again. Pass on this video. We may have to get out and protest. Trust the plan. Work with your local representatives. Call, share this video. Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot let this great America fall to the deep state.
Hey friends, Sean from SGTReport.tv and SGTReport.com here. It's 11:30 p.m. Central Time as I record this, and it's my patriotic duty to share this video with you. Have you heard the terms the hammer and scorecard yet? Well, if you haven't, you're going to be hearing a lot more about those terms. And in fact, at the end of this video, you're going to hear those terms spoken by General Flynn's attorney, Sidney Powell herself. What you're about to see is the single most egregious real-time example of electronic vote fraud maybe ever captured, and it occurred live on CNN. I would ask anyone watching this video to rip it, re-upload it, share it, tweet it, and email it to CNN and to anyone on President Trump's team. The mainstream media and big tech continue to claim there is no evidence of vote or election fraud in this election. And that's because they are co-conspirators in this treason. This is an interview between L. Todd Wood and voter fraud researcher Russell Ramsland. And below this video, I will leave a link to the full interview so you can hear many more examples of electronic vote fraud captured by Russell Ramsland.
This is some amazing video that you're seeing from CNN election night. And I want to go back and show you a little bit about this clip. First, I want to explain what's happening in this clip. What's happening in this clip is this is the live feed from Clarity Elections coming through the Associated Desk or Decision Desk HQ. So this is the live feed. You're seeing the database that Clarity has as it gets updated with votes, okay? And right now, oh, and this little ribbon at the bottom, this is generated by CNN, and they update this a second after they get the update from Clarity up here. So let's just look. Right now, Andy Beshear, who is the guy that upset Matt Bevin, the governor at the time, Andy Beshear has 673,948 votes. That ties to what the ribbon from CNN says. Same thing with Matt Bevin, 662,235. So 662,235. Now, let me take you through, and real quick, I'm going to run it again. You're going to see, if you're watching just this gold, you're going to see a flash update, and then this guy's face fills the page, and then I'm going to show you what you really missed. So here we go. Watch the gold. The update's coming. Boom, there it updates, and now here's this guy. Now let me show you what you missed. We're going to drag this back frame by frame. And so here we are before the update, and now I'm going to start walking you forward. Watch the gold. Here comes the update from Clarity. Boom. There it is. So now the update, Andy Beshear has 674,508 votes. And look down below, Andy Beshear had 673,948. They haven't had a chance to update the ribbon because this is in split seconds we're looking now. So Andy Beshear has just gained 560 votes. That makes sense. That's what happens as more votes come in, right? Let's look at Matt Bevin. He now has 661, 675. But look down below. He did have 662, 235 at the exact same second that Andy Beshear has gone up 560 votes. Matt Bevin has gone down 560 votes. This is vote switching in the computer. And by the way, between the 560 gain and 560 loss, you have just seen 25% of the loss amount of this race happen in front of your very eyes.
We just heard from John Solomon that the FBI indeed is being diligent, is involved, and we all hope he is exactly right. Your thoughts first about the knowledge now that the Justice Department is involved in this review of the election.
Well, I'm delighted to hear that. I think there are any number of things they need to investigate, including the likelihood that 3% of the vote total was changed in the pre-election voting ballots that were collected digitally by using the Hammer program and a software program called Scorecard. That would have amounted to a massive change in the vote that would have gone across the country and explains a lot of what we're seeing. In addition, they ran an algorithm to calculate votes they might need to come up with for Mr. Biden in specific areas. I think that explains what happened in Michigan, where the computer glitch resulted in a change of votes of about 5,500 in favor of President Trump, just in one of 47 districts. All those districts need to be checked for that same, quote, software glitch, end quote, that would change the result in Michigan dramatically. The same thing is happening in other states. We've had hundreds of thousands of ballots mysteriously appear solely for Mr. Biden, which is statistically impossible as a matter of mathematics. It can all be documented. We are putting it into materials that we will file in federal court, and we need to seek relief in multiple states to enjoin the certification of any election results.
Unrest continues in Detroit, Michigan. The FBI is now investigating alleged voter fraud in the state. This after a whistleblower said election workers were told to backdate late ballots. Rumors of voter fraud and skewed results have turned up since election night. One Michigan county even flipped from Biden to Trump after skewed results were spotted and corrected. The county's officials still have not revealed what skewed the results to begin with. We spoke with a GOP poll watcher who was observing the count in Detroit on election night to see what he observed that night. NTD's Melina Weiskup has the story.
The TFC Convention Center in Detroit has seen daily protests since Wayne County was called, with Biden winning the county at 68%, leaving Trump behind at just 30%. Since election night, pro-Trump protesters have gathered outside of the TFC Center to contest the results. One GOP poll watcher told us what he observed on election night that was suspicious to him. He explains that the ballots were counted at a slow pace. Watching the processing speed at his table and talking to his friends observing other tables, they calculated that only 7,000 ballots could have actually been counted on election night.
And I got a feeling they were intentionally slowing down the process, so they would leave a bulk of the counting to be done when no GOP representative is available.
He says the GOP watchers were told that they should be done at 5 a.m. But around 4 a.m., another truck came in with more ballots. But the election officials told the watchers they will wait for the next shift to count the newly arrived ballots.
So this truck came in and it unloaded some ballots. One of my friends was watching that. He actually took down the license number and the number of boxes they took down from the truck. And they were told by the people working there saying there's about 38,000 ballots just came back from the city clerk. God knows when that got in. They are put in here for count for the next shift.
So he decided to do some digging, finding a list of names circulating on social media claiming to be records of illegal votes cast. After doing the fact check on Michigan's voter database website, some people whose ballots were marked as received were born in the year 1900.
The next person is called James Bradley, also born in 1900 in January, a little older.
That's one example out of a list of 12,000. During our fact-check process, we found that it appears some of these records are in the process of being deleted from the Michigan database. For example, when this GOP poll watcher first searched for a woman named June Aiken, born in 1900, she was shown as registered and her ballot was received on October 8th. But the data has since been deleted. When checking for the same person now, it shows no voter registered. Another claim being disputed in Michigan is covered windows during ballot counts. Elections officials defended their decision to cover the windows, telling CNN that some windows were covered because poll workers inside those windows expressed concerns about people outside the center photographing and filming them in their work. NTD contacted the elections officials for clarification, but no response was given. And just today, Michigan's Antrim County uncovered skewed results that, when corrected, took a 30% lead from Biden and flipped the county red. The county initially reported that 62% of voters elected Biden, but updated results show Trump actually won with 56% to Biden's 42%. Antrim County officials have not identified what caused the skewed results to begin with. Reporting by Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
As the Trump campaign files lawsuits and alleges voter fraud, supporters of the president are rallying around the country. In Atlanta, Georgia, on Thursday, voters gathered for a Protect the Vote rally outside the building where ballots were being counted. Our reporters were there.
Protesters gathered outside the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, Georgia, where the county's ballots were being counted Thursday. They were there because they suspect that voter fraud is taking place during the ballot counting process. They said they want transparency and a free and fair election.
I'm just here to support the legal counting of every legal ballot. I don't want fake ballots to be counted. I voted in Georgia. I don't want my vote diluted by false ballots.
I have been here for over 20 years. I've never voted. This is the first time I've voted since I've been an American citizen. And I just want to make sure that my vote is counted. My voice is heard as a black woman living in America.
The founder and CEO of NACA, a nonprofit home ownership advocacy organization, was also at the rally, but for a different reason. He said for over a month, NACA has been helping to drive people to the polls to vote, to make sure their voices are heard.
But it's more than that. You want to make sure that the vote is counted. So we're here to make sure that all the votes are counted, and we're here to support the workers who are counting every vote. And what you see here is you see intimidation.
Mark said the other protesters were trying to intimidate the ballot counters and suppress opinions that they don't like. But this protester expressed that she feels it's her voice being suppressed.
We just have to do something to draw attention to the fact that we need free and fair elections. That's all we want, is a free and fair election.
She also said mail-in ballots create a huge opportunity for election fraud and that America needs to go back to election day voting. One protester said she was originally from communist Cuba, where they don't have a voice in electing their leaders. And she had a warning for Biden supporters who weren't willing to acknowledge the possibility of election fraud.
I am a Cuban American, and in Cuba, they suppress everybody's votes. So if you think that this is just temporary, you're wrong. It's going to happen to you in the future. So all the Democrats should be in the side of the Trump supporters today, so that this doesn't happen to you and your children one day.
Though there is no hard evidence of election fraud at present, the irregularities and unusual circumstances and behaviors surrounding the vote counting process are enough to make these voters lose trust in the election system, and many can only see it getting resolved in court. Grace Coulter, NTD News, New York.
What are your thoughts on it in Arizona?
Well, there's no way to know for sure, but you're right. There's less than 17,000 vote difference in Arizona, and there's still about 80,000 ballots to count. And they've been breaking the way for Donald Trump. And that's because this election was different than past elections. That's why the early call for Biden for Arizona was totally premature. And, we had Democrats show up at doing the mail-in ballots early this time. Usually it's Republicans, and a lot of Republicans showed up either at the polling place or dropped off their mail-in ballot on election day, and those are still being counted.
You know, another thing that there's allegations of is this voter fraud, specifically dead people voting, Congresswoman, out-of-state voters as well. Do you believe in your state, Arizona, that there possibly was fraud and that it could lead to a lawsuit if the president is not declared a winner in your state?
Yeah, the Trump campaign already filed a lawsuit in Arizona, and it has to do with we have people that have affidavits saying that the poll workers pushed the green button or told them to push the green button on the voting machine. And what happened on election day is people would put in their ballot in the machine, and there was an indicator that said, oh, there's a problem with your ballot. You may have overcounted. And what's supposed to happen is the election workers are supposed to say, oh, do you want to correct your ballot? There's even a red button and a green button. The red button you push if you want to correct the ballot and be given the chance. Well, a whole bunch of, I guess, thousands of people have testified that the poll worker just pushed the green button or told them, oh, go ahead. Well, then their votes weren't counted. So this is still ongoing. And you know that if the tables were turned, that Biden would be doing the same darn thing that Trump is doing, because it's not over yet. There's a lot of legal questions in multiple states, and this is serious stuff. And half of America voted for President Trump. It needs to be played out, finish the counting, and then played out in the courts, and we'll see who wins in the end.
Congresswoman, I wonder how you remedy that. You know, listening to that, if these poll workers indeed got involved, how would you know how many of them got involved? How could you remedy a situation like that? Is this all happening in the courts?
Well, what the lawsuit is asking for is for people to manually look at the ballots, just like they did if the ballots were mailed in. There was people actually manually looking at the ballots to see if there was overcount to try to correct it. But that didn't happen if you voted on election day. And so that's what the lawsuit is asking for. Let's manually look at these just like you did with mail-in ballots.
Interesting. All right. I want to ask you about this, and you kind of touched on this one. This switch, literally someone flipped a switch here for Fox News. And I'll show you this. A wild scene Wednesday night. This is outside of Maricopa County at the Board of Elections in Arizona. Watch this.
A very boisterous crowd. You'll start here and then start up here. And they're actually chanting, Fox News sucks. Fox News.
Yeah, protesters there chanting Fox News sucks after the network called the race there in Arizona for Biden so preemptively. What are your thoughts on that, the network doing this? I personally have been getting texts from around the country saying so many more people are watching Newsmax now because of what Fox did. Have you heard anything? Is Arizona watching our coverage here on Newsmax as well?
They certainly are. And, you know, Fox News, it was just premature. We'll see what happens in the end, but it was definitely premature to call that on election night. I mean, there were hundreds of thousands of ballots left to be counted. The other thing that Fox News flashed on the screen on election night was that Democrats were going to take more seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. Well, the opposite was true. I mean, we've gained, I think we're going to have 210 or more Republican seats in the U.S. House of Representatives. So there's two ways that they were totally, I believe, well, in that case, it was totally wrong, but they were totally premature on calling Biden for Arizona.
Congresswoman, last question for you, or last statement, if you will. Do you want to say, what would you say right now to President Trump?
Oh, keep up the fight. I mean, this isn't over till it's over. And President Trump is a fighter. And he has legal teams on the ground here in Arizona and in the other states. And there's some legitimate concerns about what happened. And, you know, I lived through impeachment. And so I see what the Democrats do to try to undermine President Trump for 4 years. You had bad FBI actors, the whole thing. Remember when President Trump in 2016 said he was being spied on and all the media laughed at him? Guess what? He was right. And so he may be right again this time. So keep up the fight.
All right, Congresswoman, good to see you. Debbie Lesko, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Newsmax TV is now America's fastest growing cable news channel. We give you the real news you need. So subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a thumbs up. If you like this video, share it with your friends. Newsmax TV streams live on YouTube for free. Newsmax TV, real news for real people.
Folks, I got to level with you. I don't believe for a second that the guy who lowered our taxes and built the strongest economy in recent history just lost to a guy who promised to raise our taxes and lock down the economy again. Do you really think these two messages are equal? Of course not. I believe it's time to hold the line, as we've seen with one of our guests today. A guy who ran the worst campaign in history. I mean, barely got out of his basement. He struggled to put a sentence together, whose son is under investigation for what we believe is money laundering, and couldn't even get endorsed by his own predecessor until the last minute, somehow got more votes than Barack Obama and arguably ran the most organized campaign in recent history for 2012? I'm highly skeptical, and you should be too. There are allegations of dead people voting, as you just heard from Matt Schlapp. Rick Grinnell said right here on Newsmax that they have referred more than 3,000 people in just Nevada for criminal charges for voting there despite not being current residents. And those are the ones we know about. There are huge alleged inconsistencies in the number of votes tallied in the middle of the night in Pennsylvania, in Michigan, other states, and statistical improbabilities going to Joe Biden and not for Donald Trump. All the errors go to Joe Biden. And what's worse, as Pam Bondi pointed out, in many cases, Republican poll watchers were barred from even entering to observe, even after a judge's order. In Michigan, some reports say 6,000 votes were switched back to Trump after a, quote, glitch was found. That's the same software was also used in 47 other counties. So yeah, I'm suspicious. What's even more odd is that the Democratic strongholds that are the last ones to be counted, under Democratic mayors and judges, and in most cases, governors. I watched these same bastions of liberalism burn down their own cities after they fumed over the fact that Trump was elected in 2016. And now what? After calling Trump supporters racist, bigoted, homophobic, istophobic, phobophobe, deplorable, uneducated rubes, they want all Trump supporters to just turn around and accept Joe Biden won in a fair election? That chance, buddy. So it is that far-fetched to think that the same party that concocted a fake dossier and spent $40 million of our money over a president for some garbage Russian collusion theory would try to rig an election? Of course it's feasible. And until some of these concerns are addressed, we should be skeptical, folks. Al Gore took 35 days to concede. We got some time. Never before have we seen a president that is this resilient and willing to fight. I'm praying he sees this through to the very end, until every ballot is reviewed and every legitimate vote is counted on either side. You dig in your heels and you fight everything you feel is not lawful, Mr. President. And after that, if Joe Biden turns out to be the duly elected president, then I will concede. I will sit here in this chair and respect him as my president. You have my word on that. But until then, strap in, America.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing cable news channel, now in more than 70 million homes. You can get Newsmax TV on your cable system or check your cable guide. And if your system doesn't carry Newsmax, call them, tell them you want Newsmax TV, because we're real news for real people.
Let's look at Pennsylvania right off the bat. We know that there is voter fraud that occurred. Now, how much, that is a question that will be fought out in the courts. But statewide, you had our attorney general and our governor basically guarantee a Biden victory, saying when all the votes are counted, Biden will win. We also know that just in my district alone, ballots were sent into my district that were already pre-filled out, straight Democrat voting line. If you look in the Sean Parnell-Connor Lamb race, you had two huge treasure troves of ballots that were found that were overwhelmingly almost 100% filled out for Biden and the Democrats. That's a swing district. Statistically speaking, that is a near impossibility. In Erie, going up north in the state, you have postal workers that claim that their superiors were backdating ballots that were coming in. And then in Philadelphia, of course, you had the fact that poll workers or poll watchers were not allowed access. When they were allowed access, they had to stand well away from well over the 6 feet requirement and couldn't actually watch the votes be tabulated. And we know that on election night, President Trump was up over 500,000 votes. I believe it was about 674,000 votes. The fact that this lead has been eroded to basically 0.5%, very suspect. And just one more thing while I talk about the stats. You had two statewide row offices. Rarely in Pennsylvania did they go Republican. We picked up 2 statewide offices, and yet we didn't win the presidential. Statistically speaking, that is abnormal. That does not usually happen in Pennsylvania. Plus, we lost 0 seats. Congressional seats in Pennsylvania. The numbers just don't make sense.
Yeah, the down ballot becoming a split ticket there, that is a big question, too. Another question really quickly with you. Pennsylvania's history of voter fraud. There's a lot of allegations about things that happen in Pennsylvania. Give our viewers just an idea of what you've seen, what you've heard.
Well, voter fraud here is constantly an issue, whether you're talking about downtown Pittsburgh or whether you're talking about the Philadelphia issue. It's just something that you have to overcome. We know that there were individuals that were dead that miraculously registered to vote and mailed in a vote. We also know that in some precincts, we're being told there was over 100% voter participation. We're still working to confirm that, but clearly that would be indicative of voter fraud. So we know that we have to usually overperform as Republicans in a lot of these areas to win come election night. I'm excited to see where this lawsuit goes because, again, if there was voter fraud, we need to know about it. And for every illegal ballot that is counted, it dilutes every legal ballot that was counted. So we've got to fight this vigorously. And if we don't call the Democrat machines out on this fraud, then in future elections, they'll know they can get away with it.
Yeah.
And future Republican presidents will be undermined.
Guy, I got a few seconds left with you. Where are we now in terms of counting the votes in Pennsylvania? Are we still waiting on Philadelphia County?
I believe there's about 90,000 votes still in Philadelphia. In Western Pennsylvania and Westmoreland County, my district, last time we checked, there was about 40,000 votes. I'm not sure the exact number, but we're talking about a Biden lead by less than 0.5 percentage point. And I think that when you start going to court, knocking out these mail-in ballots, which are the vast majority of the ballots get knocked out in legal challenges, that lead will narrow and narrow. And hopefully President Trump will knock out these illegal ballots cast and prevail in Pennsylvania.
Newsmax TV is now America's fastest growing cable news channel. We give you the real news you need. So subscribe to our YouTube channel and give us a thumbs up. If you like this video, share it with your friends. Newsmax TV streams live on YouTube for free. Newsmax TV, real news for real people.
But Fox News projecting that Joe Biden taking Nevada right there, but those votes still being tabulated right now. Hi, everyone. Mike Page here as we continue to roll on here on News Now from Fox. Really a live look at the White House. Just wanted to announce once again, I already talked about this, but it's a big breaking news story. President Trump firing the Defense Secretary Mark Esper. And then so that in replacing him with Christopher Miller. So once we get some more details, of course, we'll bring that to you. But he did put that tweet out just moments ago as we continue to look at the White House, where President Trump is not giving up on the election. In fact, he's doubling and tripling down on these legal challenges. And really at the heart of the legal challenges will be his legal counsel, Rudy Giuliani. And here's an interview that he did today with Fox 5 New York.
this morning. As far as we know, President Trump is not conceding defeat. His campaign says it will contest Joe Biden as the projected winner, and his legal team is moving ahead with efforts to fight the results, filing several lawsuits beginning today in Pennsylvania.
All right, joining us now, President Trump's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, who claims that there is strong evidence of election fraud in several states. Mr. Giuliani, thanks for being with us. So,
how are you?
We're doing great. So over the weekend, everyone, or so many people, were saying, where is the evidence? So let's talk about the states you're filing today, and where's the evidence?
Well, sure. First, if people would cover me, they would have the evidence. We did a press conference on Saturday that no one covered, local stations did, in which we revealed 4 witnesses in place of 50. There were 50 others, all of whom were inspectors that were inspecting the coverage in Philadelphia. They were supposed to be allowed to see the ballots. They saw no ballots. They were kept over 20 feet away. When they went to court and the judge required they be put closer, the sheriff refused to put them closer and even threatened to arrest them. This will be documented in a lawsuit that will be filed today. That lawsuit now has over 70 witnesses, as well as videotape, that will prove that 350,000 ballots in Philadelphia have to be discarded. They can't be counted because they are under the law of Pennsylvania, which is set by the state legislature. They're illegal ballots. They were observed by no one. The envelope that the envelope that would tell you that they're valid ballots has been cast aside. The only thing left is a ballot, and we have to trust that the Democratic machine of Philadelphia, which has cheated just about in every election in 60 years, was doing it honestly. So, now, of course, that's beyond credulity, but it doesn't matter. The minute you discard the envelope, you don't have a person inspected, it's an illegal ballot. And they even ultimately defied a court order to do that. In Pittsburgh, very similar, about 150,000 ballots. In their case, during the first half, they didn't allow us access. But then when the court issued an order, they allowed us access. So instead of 300,000 ballots, there's 150,000 there. That would amount to 450,000. So maybe the press could stop saying there's no evidence. So there's a different. Now you may not believe the evidence,
right?
But you don't get to decide that. The judge does. So there is evidence of voter fraud.
Who pays
fraud
for
on the
the
part
lawsuits?
Of the Democrat Party
right now, Mr.
Fraud
Giuliani.
on the part of the Democrat Party of Pennsylvania. There also are about 30 cases of backdated ballots. There are witnesses. That means evidence. There are ballots that came in on November 4th, and people were instructed, and there are witnesses for this, people were instructed to backdate it to the 3rd. We're up to 400 of those. And then there are about 50 so far dead people who voted.
So
I don't know
who's
if you know
paying
it,
for
but
it, Mr. Giuliani? Who's paying for the lawsuits?
the Republican National Committee.
Gotcha.
This
No
lawsuit
taxpayer
here is
money.
being paid for by the Republican National Committee. But I really, you should stop saying there's no evidence.
Mayor,
in fact,
but-
there's
but
evidence
it's
pouring
not-
in.
but Mayor, it's not
beyond
just
that,
the
there's
media-
evidence pouring in all over the country.
Right.
That there was fraud. So we have to gather it. The next state we'll be moving in probably tomorrow is in the state of Michigan, where there's multiple evidence of fraud.
But Mayor,
Similar
can I just interrupt one quick second? It's not just the media saying this. It's Chris Christie, an advisor to President Trump, who says basically, we're not going to follow the president blindly. We need evidence. He's
Well, they have
saying that
evidence
there's no
now.
evidence, and he's a friend of yours.
I didn't call them idiots. I'm telling you, they're uninformed. There is evidence that it happened. There are thousands and thousands of witnesses. I have 70 of them in this one case. There are about 200 in Michigan. There are about 200 in Nevada. There are well over 1,000 witnesses that fraud was committed. There are actual dead people that we have found on the rolls. There are people, at least 100 people in different states who have been told to backdate ballots. They are willing to go under oath. Many of them have given us affidavits. There is a boatload of evidence. So if people want to say there's no evidence, they can say it, but it's uninformed. And now they should be on notice that it's untrue.
So
Now,
how long will this process take, Mayor?
as long as it takes for a court to have a hearing. These people are ready to read. We now have 50 people ready to testify in a court in Philadelphia that they were deliberately prevented from carrying out their duties so that, in essence, the count in Philadelphia was unlawful. Not the first time this has happened in Philadelphia. It happens almost every year. Joe Frazier was voting for 3 years after he was dead. Will Smith's grandfather voted for 2 years after he was dead.
But we don't know if they voted in this election, right?
But I do know that over 40 people died and voted.
So is there any
I just began counting. Look, you can fight it all you want. The reality is dead people voted. Over 300,000 ballots were counted in secret just by the Democrats. It happened to be when they caught up from the ridiculous 700,000 they were behind.
Is there any truth that Melania...
Overnight, they found 300,000 ballots that Republicans never got a chance to observe.
Well, we know you're going to argue this in a court, but is there any truth that Jared and Melania suggested to the president that he needs to start thinking about?
I have no knowledge to that effect. The president didn't tell me anything like that. I would seriously doubt it. And I think that the reason I'm on here is to try and get coverage of what has been basically censored, that all weekend we've been presenting evidence of fraud that isn't covered. We hold press conferences and it's not covered, which is similar to the censorship that was done of the Hunter Biden tapes that were very serious crimes. So, this is getting to be kind of crazy for America.
Mr. Mayor, I'm just wondering...
A court may reject this evidence, a court may accept this evidence, but you can't say there's no evidence.
Mr. Mayor, I know that you're very close with the president. Have you had a chance to talk with him this morning, and what is his state of mind?
His attitude is exactly what it always is. The president has seen a mountain of evidence that there was fraud committed in over 10 different states now. 3 or 4 of them, it's substantial. It takes a little while to gather it, but we're about to file suit in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania, for the entire state, in order to allege that there are many, many more unlawful ballots than the difference between him and Joe Biden, and that 700,000 lead that he had on election night disappeared, largely because they counted ballots that Republicans never got a chance to observe. So we're highly suspicious of it. But in any event, they're unlawful.
Well, we appreciate you coming on Good Day New York and giving us an update on this. Keep us in the loop and let us know how it goes.
I will. And please, see if we can get fair reportage of the evidence we're putting out. We're putting it out, like 3 times a day.
Well, okay, we look forward to seeing the evidence.
Thank you so much.
We haven't been putting it out all weekend, and your viewers didn't get to see it because nobody covered it.
Well, we're covering it now. Mayor Giuliani.
Thank you. And I appreciate that very much. You're the first to do it. And thank you, Rosanna. Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right. Thank you so much.
And it doesn't look like this will be ending anytime soon. It looks like President Trump is committed to going all the way to December to see if he can.
A lot of people who believe in that system now. And what I don't like is people out there trying to undermine this system that was put together so hard by the Secretary's office and those county elections directors. Now, let me be perfectly clear on another point. We are going to find that people did illegally vote. That's going to happen. There are going to be double voters. There are going to be people who did not have the qualifications of a registered voter to vote in this state. That will be found. Is it 10,353? Unlikely. But every election, as I've said, I think every day at this podium, is imperfect. The issue now is, with margins, we are the winner for the closest in the country at 0.2%. When the margins are this tight, every little thing matters. So this office will thoroughly investigate, and we will work to find ways. We know the system counted properly. We know the ballots that were there were counted properly and correctly. We know that. We're going to have an audit to prove it, and it looks like more than likely the president will ask for a recount to reaffirm that. But on the front end, we need to make sure that the absentee ballot process is as tight as it can be so we can stop illegal voting and prevent double voting now and in the future. So with that, I'll take any questions y'all might have.
You addressed several issues. One I wanted to bring up, your President Joe Biden alleged that it's ballot harvesting. Have you seen any ballot harvesting? I know what he's talking about.
We have not seen that at this time, but I do believe we have some reports of it, so our investigators would likely be looking into it, but I don't have specific information at this time. Yes. Either one. Y'all decide. Okay, so with 47 having certified so far, it means we have 112 more to go. which is not insignificant, and some of them are the larger counties, but we have some of the larger counties in this. Richmond's already certified, Muskogee's already certified, so we already have some of the larger counties in here, but it will be a process as they continue to wrap up the final pieces of the provisionals. We feel like most of the uploads were already done over the weekend, and now you'll find the ticky-tacky things where they do their reconciliations and make sure that, yes, we've got all the ballots to be uploaded. So that's what happens first. So we're trying to move them as fast as they can in certification so that we can do our risk-limiting audit and know the decision has not been made as to which race will be done on. But the outward bounds of all these, again, are the counties have to certify by this Friday.
Mark Stein, thanks for joining us. Look, the Liberal left seem to say that democracy is in ruins when they're out of office and that their country is in ruins when they're out of office. But when the Democrats win, suddenly democracy's fine and they're all patriotic again.
Yeah, it's interesting. For 4 years, a clear, decisive victory by President Trump was presented as the machinations of the Russians and Vladimir Putin, but a close, tight, dubious election. If you question that, you're questioning the entire integrity of the democratic process, and there's no place for that in our society. They're always brilliant at turning on a dime, the left, because they basically operate on the principle that it's different when they do it. So they're cock-a-hoop right now.
You talk about a dubious election result. Is democracy in peril with Donald Trump taking these legal challenges, or is he just exercising his right, in fact, perhaps his obligation?
Well, obligation, I think, is right on behalf of over 70 million Americans who voted for him. America has the least clean elections in the Western world, and it would certainly shock any Australian, any Canadian, any Frenchman, any Dane, any Swede what goes on in American elections. And in this case, a handful of hardcore Democrat cities that have run corrupt elections, in some cases since the end of the Civil War. I mean, we're going back 150 years. Have managed to decide the result of the election for the rest of the country. And there are real questions and real grievances about what went on. The famous boxing champion, Joe Frazier, voted in Pennsylvania, even though he's been dead for 5 years. June Aiken, who was a beautician in the beauty salon at Field's department store in Jackson, Michigan for many years. She did her civic duty and she voted in the election even though she died last year. In Michigan, I believe it's getting close to 1,500 centenarians managed to cast votes in this election. Some of them are super centenarians, 118 years old, 120 years old, but God bless them, they still did their duty and requested absentee ballots because they've been seriously absentee. They've been singing with the Celestial Choir for the last decade or so. Nevertheless, all those 118, 120-year-old, you know, it's remarkable to me, Michigan, every 4th November, certainly this time, turns out to have the highest life expectancy on the planet. And then all these super centenarians, 118, 120, they all go quiet until they're needed in 4 years' time.
There's some extraordinary stuff there, and there's no doubt there's incidents of malpractice and these sorts of strange episodes with deceased people casting ballots and the like. But the point is whether or not there was enough wide-scale corruption to question the election result. Is that the case, or is Donald Trump trying it on? And perhaps it's more the case of these extraordinary mail-in ballot rules. The rules changed because of the coronavirus, and the Democrats and their organisational friends trying to exploit that and working the system on the ground perhaps a lot better than the Republicans.
Oh, yes, I think there's no doubt they're much better than that. Look, I understand this has been a weird year with the coronavirus and everything. The first election to be held in North America since the COVID broke was a couple of weeks ago in the Canadian province of New Brunswick. The polls closed at 8 p.m. and the result was announced at 8:55 p.m. So even with the COVID, they were able to conduct a normal election. We have situations now, which again is unique in the developed world, where they cannot tell you the result of the election 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 days after the polls closed. That's not an accident. The chaos is a choice because it provides cover for all kinds of murky goings-on, including these deliveries, mysterious deliveries of vast boxes of uncounted votes that turn up at 3:45 in the morning. Again, if you're familiar with elections elsewhere, it's extraordinary what happened on election night round about whatever it was, 10:47 p.m., where suddenly the states that are closely contested all decide that the poll workers are going home for the night and they'll resume at some time in the morning. I've never seen that in any country where I've chanced to be spending an election. The parties spent $14 billion on the election. That would be a lot of money almost anywhere on the planet, and yet unfortunately that $14 billion isn't enough to pay for someone to do the night shift at the count in Philadelphia and in Detroit and in Milwaukee and other places. I regard the 2-year presidential election campaign is largely a complete waste of time anyway, but it's particularly a waste of time if you're going to have a 2-year election campaign and then basically the result is decided by which boxes show up between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. On the day after the election.
It is clearly below par. It is clearly unsatisfactory. But what should Donald Trump do in these situations? What should he do for the good of his party and the good of the country?
Well, I think the Democrats have got plans for him. You know, it's not enough to chase him from office. They would actually like to get him in jail, or at least spend the next 2 decades of his life trying to put him in jail. So he's really got nothing to lose. He's been a consequential president. And they want to teach the lesson, not just for populists in the United States, but populists throughout the West, that this is over. You've had your fun. It's not going to happen again. So they're determined to drive a stake through the vampire. And that being the case, Donald Trump has got nothing to gain by being just a graceful loser. The Republicans are good at that. Bob Dole, Mitt Romney, John McCain, they all make terrific losers. They give terrific concession speeches. Donald Trump was elected in part because he punches back. And in that sense, he's got nothing to lose. He should keep punching back. He should exhaust his legal appeals. Even if people think it's bad form, don't worry about it, because if you take this guy out, the next guy is sure to be just your conventional Republican loser, a Jeb Bush type, a John Kasich type, and he'll be giving a magnificent concession speech in 2024. But that is not who Donald Trump is, and if he's going to go down, there's no point going down like a Mitt Romney or a Bob Dole.
There's a lot of sense in that from Mark Steyn, but honestly, this talk about presidents going to jail, it is shocking. And I think the Democrats have played a shocking game over the past 4 years with their attacks and their attempts to delegitimise and impeach Donald Trump. But also Donald Trump has led a lot of chants saying lock her up when it came to Hillary Clinton and the like. So it's ugly on both sides there, and we shouldn't have it.